Around the Payload is a High Noon production. Check out all the High Noon productions at highnoonpodcast.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Around the Payload. I am your host, the Blevins, and we have a ragtag group of guests today. Some returning members, a couple of new ones, but let's jump right into that. Before I get to introducing the guests, I just want to let all of the new folks here kind of know what this show is about and what we're doing here. It's basically, if you're familiar with Around the Horn from ESPN, it's a lot like that. It's a lot like that, but definitely legally different. So please don't sue us, ESPN. I'm gonna be doling out points for things that I agree with, things that I think are cool, and taking away points for things that make me angry. I am the sheriff in town, and there's nothing you can do to stop that because I've got the point scoring board machine over here. Just so you guys know and the audio listeners know, you're going to hear sounds that sound like this every once in a while. That is me giving out points. It is not you accidentally queuing up for a quick play match that you forgot to play. But without further ado, let's get to announcing these guests. We have returning multi-time returner Gil Frost, the CPO, I think that you probably made that up, right? Of Carbon Entertainment and everyone's favorite left guy. What's up, Gil? Thanks for being back.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
And you know what? I got to start it off, Gil. You're getting a point for that tie. I mean, it's just too good. You're really showing everyone up here for no other reason than to have everyone get back on the train. But we also have, everyone knows, co-host of High Noon Podcast, the host of Foul Play, as well as many, many other things in the High Noon Productions. Mr. Deathblow, what's up, buddy?
Not too much. Just mad that my outlaw hat doesn't fit.
Why don't you order a smaller head next time?
I will think about that.
We've got a couple of newbies in here. First, we've got Kyle Wynn, a member of the HNP staff and co-host of the Blackwatch Report. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here for my first show after like 3 weeks of trying to figure out when it was and make the time.
I'm going to pretend like most of it's not my fault, but it definitely is. It almost always is. And last but certainly not least, we have the GreatRootBear, who is the founder of the 5 Deadly Venoms Booster Club for NYXL. All those awesome NYXL viewing parties that you're seeing. So, yeah, that's him. He's the guy. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's jump right into this. We had a week off of playing, but that did not mean a week off of content and topics. So let's begin.
Round 1. Capture the objective.
So hot off the presses, though it was speculated before, we have the Fissure trade or release or whatever you want to call it approved. So Fissure, formerly on the London Spitfire, now going to the Los Angeles Gladiators. Gil, I want to start with you. Does this drastically improve the LA Gladiators?
Drastically. It's kind of hard because they've been a little all over the place, but I think that having multiple tanks in your lineup is always going to be important. And so I don't know exactly how they're going to fit them in. I do think that, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it seems like I mean, iRemix is not in the top echelon, like maybe the top 4 to 6 tanks, I would say. And so having another one on board allows you to utilize them both maybe in unique ways and get a lot more out of your front line. And so I'm really hoping that it does, but I'm suspending my expectations for now. I think they need to make more changes before they're able to really ramp up into something really meaningful as far as growth.
Makes sense. Death, what are your thoughts here on Fissure going to the Gladiators?
Sure, I think it's definitely going to drastically improve this team and their compete level. Maybe not necessarily their win total at the end of the stage. It might not make a huge difference there. But as far as compete level goes, this is going to make a big difference. iRemix hasn't been a problem for the LA Gladiators through the first stage, but he hasn't been a playmaker either. And that's something that I think Fissure can absolutely do for this team. There was a time when we talked about this guy as the #1 tank in Overwatch. not in Apex, not in, you know, he was the #1 tank across the board when he was with Kongdu Panthera in a lot of people's eyes, myself included. You know, obviously there's been, you know, better Winstons at time, looking at Miro, things like that. But this guy has been an all-around top performer, and I think he's going to open up and make more plays for this team than iRemix was able to do. And when you look at, you know, their backline too, like, just if you can protect that backline a little bit more with Big Goose going to Lucio, Shaz being a big playmaker like he is, an underrated playmaker like he is, I think this could have a big impact here and really help keep the Gladiators as a team that has a shot at the playoffs, which I don't think they did without this trade.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a big shakeup there. But RootBear, I want to get your thoughts here on Fissure going to the Gladiators. What does this do for them? Oh,
I'm not sure.
Oh, there we go.
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. And the reason I say that is the team has been very inconsistent, and inconsistency can have there's a lot of causes for inconsistency in any squad. Hell, we go through this all the time, right? When we play ourselves. Adding individual players, especially like in a tank position, can be something awesome, but it's going to come down to how the asset is utilized, and I'm very curious to see how that handles within the Gladiators framework. You know, one of the funny questions people always have is, how will communication handle? And I'm sure you've seen this, right? Dallas is a great example of a squad where I've got hunches. I can't prove anything, but I've always got hunches that maybe comms have been challenges, maybe composition has been an issue. So I have high hopes. I like the way the Gladiators play, but I think we'll just have to wait and see, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. And Kyle, last thoughts here on Fissure going to the Gladiators.
I think if nothing else, it will at least free up Bishu, who I think has been like really struggling to kind of balance protecting Remix and protecting the backline, because Remix would often dive in, and it didn't look like he was playing it as safe. So a lot of the best tanks like Gamestone and Muma know when to get out, and they don't require that many resources around them. I think Fissure is of that same brand, in that like he can be self-sufficient and not require a diva pocketing him at all chances. At all times, so he doesn't periodically die. And so what I think this does is it definitely, at least if nothing else, if the communication is not as good, if the team does nothing, you know, super duper new, at least they have a tank who's not going to suck away their resources and allow their backline to get a little bit more help. So I think that like it will definitely be a improvement. How much, I think we have yet to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, it's like I feel like over the past few weeks, the Gladiators have just been like a snooze fest. Just like they're inconsistent, or they're consistently like mediocre. So I think this is at least going to shake things up, hopefully, in their case, for the better. But let's move on. We've talked a little bit over the last few weeks about having 12 players on the roster. Obviously, London was the only team to field 12 players. They were able to do internal scrims for a little bit, but now we've actually seen them release players or trade, whatever you want to call it, from their roster to free up space. So, Death, should Overwatch League teams have 12 players on their squad?
Boy, I've been saying this since before the matches started playing, since the moment they basically told us you were going to be able to carry 12 players. You have to have 12 players on your team. It's not really an option in my mind. You're just hurting yourself by you're taking away options. You're taking away practice time, the ability to scrim. I think even 11 is a pretty decent sized mistake. If for no other reason, then you can't have your 7 to 12 team scrim against somebody else's 7 to 12 team. Right now, a lot of these bench players are sitting stagnant, doing nothing but playing comp. That's not good for their development as players. They're not doing the team any good. They're just sitting there and kind of their skill is decaying. Like, not their SR, but their physical skill is decaying because they're not as involved as they've been in the past and as involved as they need to be. So yes, you have to get up to 12 players. You have to be able to let those guys scrim, you know, against other B teams, whether it's tier 2, whether it's other Overwatch League B teams. And you have to have them playing at their best, because when you need them, you want them to be playing at their absolute best. And if you look at guys like Numlocked, who's been on the bench and complaining about playtime and how he gets this salary to basically play competitive mode, that to me, you know, I mean, he kind of knew what he was getting into, right? I don't think any of us expected him to start. But at the end of the day, the team isn't doing right by him by not giving him everything he needs to get better as a player. And I think they should continue to add. Every team should continue to add until they get to 12. And I don't think there's any exceptions there.
A lot of good points there. RootBear, I want to get your thoughts here. What do you think about teams carrying 12?
I think it's pretty much a requirement. I think the people need. Florida was a great experiment in starting off with 6, which I think is nuts.
Yeah.
Oops.
Oh, look, in any sport, you've got to have lines. You need to have a bench. It helps with just security around structure of a team. People get sick, as you saw from the flu bug tearing through the entire league over the last month. But more importantly, it's that it allows and it offers a team the ability to handle more like internal and specialized practices. To me, it makes a lot of sense. It's like there's a reason why you want 4 centers, right? So I'm using a hockey reference here. Because I'm Canadian, and that's what we do. We always say hockey.
That's what you're all about, you say?
Oh, it's real hot here, eh? I can't handle this temperature here, eh? No, but there's a reason you have that, and some people are used as utilities. Right now, part of this, it's problematic, and the reason I think there's some resistance to it is the way substitutions are made right now in the league. I still think it's weird that you have to preset them, but anyway, I digress. More importantly, though, I think it is absolutely critical because you have an A and a B squad, right? So that at least you've got full squads potentially set up, assuming you have even distributions. But more importantly, it allows you to actually experiment with combinations, and everything's about learning systems. And the longer any team goes in any sport using one system, it's creating an opportunity for other people to figure you out.
Yep.
So I always talk about the Isaiah Thomas on the old school Detroit Pistons coming up with the Jordan rules. They shut down a very high-flying, very young Michael Jordan. Like, they shut him down. Right? Because Isaiah Thomas in the middle of the night invented the Jordan rules, and which is crazy, right? But you see that happen, and it's a great way to shut down high talented teams. The Islanders shut down the Oilers when they were a high flying young team because they figured out their system. So 12, I think, is a great way to avoid that, and also it encourages experimentation, which I think we're starting to see some systems get poked at. Seoul, we saw what happens because they have a huge VORP problem around Jaehong. And what happens when they take out Jaehong and they try a slightly different, meta, and they get spanked, right? And I think that 12 will help really prevent this, assuming teams have the management capability to handle 12.
Right. I mean, we definitely have seen. I mean, London Spitfire has really. I mean, even when they were, when part of them was GC Busan, we saw them really poke holes in Lunatic High at the time and other teams where on paper maybe they weren't as talented when you line them up. But Kyle, I want to get your thoughts here. Any opposing thoughts on having 12?
A little bit. So I definitely do agree that there's certain teams that absolutely should. Any team that is at 11 should pick up the 12. Just to have in-house, but I think that there's other teams that could benefit from not needing to do that because of the academy teams. So we saw that New York just got, I think it's not announced yet, but it was leaked. So we know that, like, at least, if nothing else, there is for sure Flower on the New York academy team and a group of 5 or 6 other players that could play around him and be a really, 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 really strong team that could play against the main Overwatch League XL team and act essentially as that sort of sister team that the Korean teams had, or just like the other 6 on a 12-man roster. Whereas you get a team like the Valiant, definitely, they don't have an academy team. They don't have another team to practice off of that much. They definitely should pick up, I think it's 1 or 2 extra players to get that 12 so Numlock stops, freaking out about the fact that he's doing nothing on this freaking team. I think so. Yeah, there's any teams that has an academy team should be okay as long as it's not like a complete trash tier academy team, which I'll be the judge of here pretty soon. But yeah, I think if you don't have an academy team, you should go for 12.
Definitely makes a lot of sense, and it is interesting to see how those lower end team or lower tier squads factor in. But Gil, last words here on teams bringing in 12.
Well, I think that long-term, most definitely, it's going to be the case that successful teams, or all teams, I think, eventually are going to need to have full rosters. Not necessarily for all the reasons that have been mentioned here. First of all, they're looking at the teams right now, and the teams that don't have 12, that's not necessarily a detriment. I think that we're seeing teams like the Mayhem where it is very much a detriment, but that's more of a infrastructural problem than just simplifying it to the roster. You have to have the infrastructure to be able to cultivate talent and build a team and then strategically use all of those elements. And so you can throw players into a roster, it might not actually have the result that you want. And so some of these teams early on, they're opting for a smaller roster, building out their core because maybe that's all the infrastructure they have. That's the management and everything supporting them. And then I think we're going to start working more towards long-term full rosters with multiple looks. And that's the second key factor is I don't think we're going to be seeing the like A squad and B squad thing, really. I don't think that a good functional team is going to have two very clear, separate groups of players that can be their standalone teams, just because of the nature of the game. Of course, you see that in other sports, maybe because of fatigue, and there are other strategic elements to that. But Overwatch, you're really going to want to use multiple looks on multiple maps against multiple opponents to drive your strategy when you're using your tools. And so that's where we're going to see the full rosters really coming to bear. And I do want to say that London Spitfire, I think, have given us a really good example for how the 12-man roster can be used, not only from a strategic standpoint, because they have had multiple ups. They've been very, very adaptable. And if they come with a good game plan, they're able to execute it. And, well, I mean, they did very well, as it turns out, in the first part of the season. But
if they steal a good game plan?
Oh, wow. If any
fired.
organization is good at cultivating talent, it's, of course, Jack over there at Cloud9, who is, of course, the core of is the owner, I guess. I don't actually know how it works exactly, of the London Spitfire, but he has already benefited from having 12, not only in how they've been playing, but he knows that in cultivating talent, you can actually make that a good business move as well, as he's already traded away a few players. And if you can actually cultivate talent that's not necessarily going to be in your front line, your front lineup, then you're going to actually make a little bit of money off of that as well. So there's definitely multiple layers to this, and we're going to see more and more teams opting and trending towards what London Spitfire have been able to do with their full roster.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good points. I think I agree overall that teams in the future, I think in a couple of seasons, we're going to see every team have 12, no questions asked. But in the next or the rest of this season, maybe even the next 1 or 2 seasons, we might see the academy teams really kind of bear the weight of that. That's definitely an interesting way to look at it. But we will move right along, and we've had the roster shakeups and the additions and signings happen over this past week or two, with the acquisition period obviously opening up. And one thing that we've noticed is that there's really there's not a ton of Western players being picked up in these acquisitions. I think we have Zappis, AKM, Fact Fiction. That might be the end of the list. I don't think there's many more. And then obviously there's been a lot of Korean players picked up into the Overwatch League. So, Root, I wanted to get your thoughts here. Why do you think we're not seeing the Westerners and the Europeans get picked up as much as the Korean players right now?
Ooh, that is that's a tough question. The only thing I can think of is it is standard organizational risk mitigation. They're just going with players that they've seen have had more exposure under high pressure situations, and that's it. It's sort of like how a lot of folks were railing on the league, saying why aren't there's such a great cast of diverse casters that could be doing this. Where's Golden Boy? And I'm like, hold on, just let them get through the first month, right? And then we'll see what happens. If the season ends and nothing's changed, sure, but I think it's nothing more than that. There's a bit more data. There is also a bit more structure in terms of where you can see where matchups of like head-to-head. So like in baseball, you look at splits all the time. I think that's it. And I haven't looked at the roster pickups in much detail. It's funny, I'm really behind on things after like doing the whole trip to LA and then try to get everything set up for stage 2. But I've always wondered how much teams are going to be concerned about split between like players that are focused on being sort of streaming personalities versus focusing on the team. With the Asian players, at least, being in an esport, being a competitive gamer is serious business. You show up as like a generalized celebrity, You do not mess about. Oh, that sounded really Canadian.
Super Canadian.
Oh my god.
I was just gonna let it fly.
You can say
but
sorry if you want to.
Sorry.
it's okay. You're not
Sorry.
gonna lose points for Canadianisms, considering Buffalo is essentially just more southern Canada.
We love Buffalo in Toronto. You're the reason we have American television. We don't get any of that Rochester business. Leave that to the Montrealers. They get Rochester. We got Buffalo. No, I think that's what a lot of it is. It's just you know that when you bring in a Korean import, you kind of know where their headspace is at. You know that there'll be a certain focus. And again, I think it's nothing more than early days risk mitigation. And I think we'll see a ton open up. I mean, look at the contenders lineups. We'll see this all open up, I think, once contenders lands. And I think a lot of our sort of concerns about where the focus is will start to dissipate with that change.
Definitely a lot of good points there. Kyle, I want your thoughts on this one.
I think that, like, from what I've noticed, most of the players who are being picked up are ones, specifically like the Korean players, are ones that have been in and out of Apex for a while and have kind of, I think it's cut their teeth is the term, like on these, I think it's like a higher value practice being in Korea and doing Apex compared to being in NA and doing the kind of our version of tier 2 tournaments here. I think you get better players that way. And so like Saya player, an awesome guy we've seen, they've been in and out of Apex. They have more Apex experience, whereas most of the NA players who are not already in Overwatch League have very limited experience. And I do think that once Contenders kind of gets rolling, we've seen that a lot of the rosters are kind of 50-50 split. I think that once Contenders gets rolling and most of the players who were in Apex are either in Contenders or up in OWL, we'll kind of see that difference kind of be less and less over time. But I still think there is a significant difference in terms of like the practice that the Korean players get or got through Apex compared to what the NA players have.
Yeah, definitely some notable differences there. But Gil Frost, what are your thoughts here on this difference and these players that are getting pulled in early into Overwatch League?
Well, it's obviously mechanics. I mean, Western players are just terrible. They just terrible mechanics. No, obviously it's not. And that's
I can
one of the
attest
key
to
things
that because I'm a Western player.
Yeah. Listen, I'm also a Western player, and I can tell you that mechanics are not my problem. No, they're probably a problem as well. But no, I mean, it is more of that risk mitigation around infrastructure and experience than it is around mechanical skill and just raw skill in general. Even if we're talking outside of mechanics. And yeah, it kind of comes down to what can you guarantee? Like I used to work at Apple, and I can put that on my resume. And just the fact that I work with an organization of that like caliber, no matter what your opinions are of the company in general, that has its own weight. And so yeah, when you've got players that have played in Apex, they played in an infrastructure that is already much more developed than anything in the West, really. I mean, up until Overwatch League, even Contenders, there were orgs that did have very good infrastructure and some that didn't necessarily have some great. You just didn't have that name brand to make sure that you could manage that quality to some level. And in fact, talking to tier 2 players that are all kind of now in this position where they want to get onto Contenders teams. Of course, they all want to get on a Contenders team of some kind, but they especially would like to get on an academy team because that gives you some of that infrastructural experience that you can work with an organization that has already tested the waters with how to run a successful team, and now you can actually carry that forward and become much more valuable. So we are going to see that continue to improve, and as more talent is being filtered in through Contenders, Contenders teams are a lot more likely to pick up a little bit more of an unknown player just based on their skill in comp queue and maybe other events, because they can now start to cultivate that talent with at a very lower risk than you would in the Overwatch League. But for the early stages, at the very least, they're going to be looking for that more experienced talent. The only other thing I want to say is look at the Western talent that has made it through. I mean, the two people that come to mind are Zappis and Fact Fiction. These are two players. Well, Zappis, of course, is going to be joining a lot of his old teammates, but both of them have played for organizations that have found success in their regions, and so they were closer to those safe picks because they knew what they were getting, and so that risk was not nearly as high.
All I heard from that is you're basically saying that Apex is the Apple of competitive Overwatch. So
Are the Apple of competitive? Oh boy. Yeah, sure.
There's your show title.
there's a show title if I've ever heard one. Episode title, that is. But Death, last words on this. I know after you clean out the vomit in your mouth from
God, I take back at least half the nice things I said about your tie, Gil Frost. I didn't know you worked for Apple. I would have never complimented you had I been aware of that.
Oh, snap.
But listen, I mean, I do think a lot of what you guys said is right. Obviously, the infrastructure matters a ton. But when you look at how the Korean teams, for even before Overwatch and before Apex was being run, you know, a lot of these players come from other games where they're very used to the structure of having a coach that they, you know, respect a little bit more, I think, than Western players tend to respect their coaches, things like that. Everything about it, we can dress this question up in any number of ways, and at the end of the day, it comes down to the depth in Korea is just much greater than it is in the West. It's because of the infrastructure. It's because of all the LAN experience that these guys got playing at Apex. It's just you know, it's not really, honestly, even close when you're talking about depth. I do think the overall skill level of the players at the top is very close. I think that was kind of proven by the fact that number 2 in the standings right now is a completely Western team. And, you know, there's a lot to be said for the strides that they've made, but they're playing catch up right now. Even the top end Western teams are playing catch up right now. They're not used to this level of preparation and this level of organization and structure that these teams are giving them. So I expect this to, you know, not be something that continues throughout. Like, I think the West is going to catch up with the East as far as number of players in the league over time. But for the time being, at least right now, you're looking at picking up players that have X number of hours played on stage, which the West can't, or, you know, the West can't compete with that. You're looking at X number of time spent in, you know, formal coaching meetings and things like that just can't be matched. And I think that's really where the biggest difference lies, is in the depth of players, right? And we're going to see that level out. And we're going to see, honestly, the contenders in the path to pro. If that's successful, it will level out, because I don't think the overall top end ability of these players is determined by nationality. Right? That's just, there's no way that's true. I don't think we've seen that play out outside of, like, you know, Kenyans and their ability to run. I just don't think we've seen that play out in very many sports. And I just think it's a matter of, we've got to get these guys in the classroom setting and get them caught up on the things that you don't just get by, you know, logging in and playing ranked all.
Right. Yeah, definitely a lot of good points there. And I think I agree with Root Bear's point at the beginning. That's like, this issue is probably going to sort itself out once we get more data and everything starts to standardize over time. But let's move right along. Last question in round 1. This is the first kind of grudge match we have of this stage. It is Boston and Houston. They fought a really hard battle at the end of stage 1 for a playoff berth for the Houston Outlaws, and they're playing right in the first week. So, Kyle, only one. There can be only one. Who do you have here and why? Boston versus Houston.
Well, let's do a quick little, I don't know, man. No, so I do think, though, that it looks to me that Houston understand the meta first. So as we learned that Junkrat was really, really good, what did we see? We see Jake pretty much play nothing but Junkrat, and he grinded the hero till he became the absolute best at it. Boston got really good at dive. Dive is good. It's a good, like, team strat, but it's not, like, as broken, I guess, as the Mercy and Junkrat meta was. You saw Banny, who would grind the heck out of Mercy, got really good at it and was like one of the best Mercies in the league, and as well as Boink, who was also one of the best Mercies in the league, as we saw that stat posted by the Twitter earlier, whatever. But we've seen that, like, Houston, before any other team kind of understand what the meta is. We saw London, like, right week 5, like, oh, hey, Junkrat's pretty good, let's try running that, and then they decimated teams. Houston, like, week 2 was like, yo, Junkrat's really good, I'm going to run him all the time and kill everyone. And it worked. And so I can only imagine that sort of mentality with coach of Tyrong, who understands the game incredibly well, with a team who is really good at picking up heroes in a short amount of time and doing doing well at them. I can only imagine that if it is 3 tanks, if it is dive, if it is whatever it is, that Houston will be the first, if not one of the first teams to kind of understand what is the best possible team comp to have, and they will run that into until it's perfect, and then they will decimate teams.
Definitely a lot of good points there. Gil, do you have are you planting your flag in Houston, or do you have are you going with Boston here?
This one is a tough one. It really is, but I do have to go with Houston. And my optic jersey is underneath. It's a tie. Hard to get to the tie, so I'm sorry. No, and aside from just the points that were previously mentioned, I think that teams at the very end of the season, we started to notice some teams figuring out and dealing with the Houston Outlaws, and that's maybe why they didn't get number one in the playoffs. Actually, is because honestly, Coolmat and Muma started getting focused down a little differently in these fights, and they've been one of the strongest tank duos in the league. I think Coolmat's probably the best off tank in the world right now. I've been preaching the good news of Muma since Contenders, and the fact that they were able to bring on Fact Fiction now means that weakness of being quote unquote figured out, and now all these teams that now kind of have the game tape to focus down the tanky front line and to deal with that, it's another big tool in their tool belt to then be able to adapt in all the other ways that they have already been able to. So I think that Fact Fiction coming in here is the X factor that tips it in the favor of Houston Outlaws for me.
I hate to even offend you by asking the question, Death, but who do you have here?
I mean, it's not offensive. This match was so close at the end of the first stage that nobody doubts how much I love Houston or how much I absolutely despise Robert Kraft and his team. We all know where I'm rooting, but I do agree with the two before me. I'm picking Houston to win here, and the big reason why is because I can look at the map pool and I can know where they're going to play. And if we're looking at King of the Hill or Control as the weak point for the Houston Outlaws, well, we're going to Lijiang Tower. They've played against Boston on Lijiang Tower, and they won it. So if they're able to flip that map, I think it suddenly becomes in favor of them. I also look at the maps here. We've got Hanamura, Kings Row, and Gibraltar in this map set. Those maps sound to me like a place, if Junkrat's going to be viable, he's going to be viable on Kings Row because we've seen it before. He's going to be viable spamming that 0.1 choke on Hanamura and keeping Boston from even getting at the first point. And when we look at these maps too, what other character sounds really good on there? Because to me, it's Widowmaker. There's a lot of sightlines on Kings Row and Gibraltar. You can play the Widowmaker on defense on Hanamura or attack on Hanamura too. So I do think the hero pool of these guys on Houston will benefit from the maps that we're playing. But I mean, Boston is going to be able to compete with anybody. I honestly thought Houston would win the last matchup a little more decisively, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. But yeah, I want to highlight the fact that what you guys said earlier, that they prepare better. Their coaching staff is phenomenal. Tyrong will help them figure out what they should be playing, and then they will grind it until they can play it at their best. So, this is a week. The quality of the opponents for Houston is so big. I wouldn't even be surprised if they are 0-2 leaving it. But at the end of the day, I think they've got an edge on both of their matchups, and I expect them to get at least one of them. And my heart needs it to be this one, right? Because I never want to see Boston take the Outlaws.
And you certainly will never live it down either, because I will become a de facto Boston Uprising fan just to rub it in.
That's fine. Discord has a mute button.
But Rootbeer, last thoughts here. Can I get a Boston taker here?
Okay, so here's my completely unscientific way of approaching this. I'm gonna pull down my set to destroy X jersey, but I'm like, I love Boston because they have like a great mix of Canadians on that squad. No, but I actually think Boston has. I think there's a lot of surprises in store with Boston. That team is playing completely differently than what we first saw them show up as in the league. I think the fact that Houston's got a good squad. And we saw that with their current structure, Boston pushed them to that limit. And the one thing that I heard more in that arena on finals day than anything else, and since then, was if only Casper didn't pull out that blade. I hear that a lot.
I thought it was going to be Buck Foston.
And I think Boston is an incredibly underrated team right now, and I wouldn't bet against them in general. Their positioning is fundamentally better now than when they first started. Just looking at the overheads and seeing what their position is like, they're a very different squad, and I think there's a lot of just good raw talent there. Where I think they will push Houston quite a bit to that level again, assuming again no one kind of humps the bunk type of thing. But overall, I think actually Boston might give Houston a really good run for their money in the follow up.
Yeah, I think regardless, it's going to be a really close match. It's hard to tell which of these teams wants it more. Like, regardless of the in-game and skill, I think they both have that hunger to win this game more than maybe even any other two teams going against each other. I think this is going to be the definition of a slobber knocker for sure. But that does bring us to the end of round one. A quick recap for the audio listeners. We've got this. I say this every week, but this is honestly, I think, the closest first round we've had. We have a three-way tie for second with Kyle, RootBear, and Gil Frost at 30 points apiece, and Deathblow just barely ahead at 33. So we are, ooh man, this one's heating up. But we will move right into round two.
Round 2. Capture the objective.
We got the news, I think it was yesterday or maybe a couple days ago, that there is going to be a coaching change with the LA Valiant. Cuddles, I don't know if it was released, but if it was released exactly the details of why he left, but he's no longer the coach. So, Gil, I want to get your thoughts on what does this say about the stability of the LA Valiant?
Well, in and of itself, definitely not much. I think that it can be easily blown out of proportion, but we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. And they have been, the Immortals organization, they've been successful and consistent in a lot of other areas. There are a few other indicators that maybe you could add up to maybe a question, not even really any actual facts, but the fact that they have had really high peaks and really low lows. Basically, I mean, they will go from winning an event against a big team to then the next event just doing just terribly. And so they're right?
Contenders.
And so there have been some indicators along those lines that you could maybe start to ask more questions. But really what this means to me is they just haven't found the recipe for success that they are going to be happy with. And Noah Winston has even been very open with the fact that he is looking for long-term, looking towards the long-term. So they're going to keep trying to work at it until they find the right recipe. And right now, the one of the biggest factors is, of course, that coaching staff. And it is difficult to find coaches, by the way. Right now in esports, it's not like you've got a lot of time to check people, or people don't have a lot of extensive resumes necessarily. And so courting and then building a relationship with a coach and then having that coach be accepted by and integrated into a team, it's definitely easier said than done. And so I think that it just means they're not quite there yet. I wouldn't take too much stock, though.
Yeah, it's a good point. But Deathblow, I want to get your thoughts. And we saw this, and we also saw kind of the Numlock situation where he's basically just sitting the bench and not doing anything but play comp. So does this say anything greater about the LA Valiant and their structure here?
You can use it to predict doom and gloom if you really want to. I don't want to, though. To me, it just says, listen, the fact that they've already had turnover at their head coach position means you're more likely to have more turnover at the head coach position, because you bring somebody in, maybe you get along with them, maybe you don't, maybe he sees eye to eye with you, maybe he doesn't. So change begets change in this scenario. And like Gil said, it's really hard to have a resume on these guys to build them up. But one thing I will say is if they liked any of these coaches and they still walked, because if you read between the lines on what Cuddles said, he was moving on to bigger and better things within Overwatch League, right? So what does that mean? Where is he going? We don't know yet. We'll find out soon. But if you really want to keep your guys around, maybe you pay him a little more. I mean, it's a crazy idea, right? Wow. But if you really like them, I don't know their salaries because Overwatch League isn't cool enough to be transparent and tell me. It's pretty cool, though, to be fair. But yeah, it's hard to say without the transparency of knowing if he had one of the lower coaching salaries in the league, then maybe he's moving into like a GM position with another team that's an expansion team from the next season, something like that. We won't know until we see where he lands. But I just think, it's not even necessarily the case. But if they really liked Cuddles and they wanted to keep him, they probably should have found a way to be able to pay him enough to keep him.
Definitely a different take on it, for sure. But RootBear, any thoughts on this and the Valiant in general?
You know, it's funny. I saw that news and I was like, okay. Look, the teams are figuring out a lot right now. I think it seems a little bit extreme to say that their performance would require a coaching change altogether. I don't think that's quite warranted. If you were in the lowest of lows and you could not figure out what it is, I would say maybe. I think we actually just need information on this one because it just seems like everything would be speculation, to be totally honest. Coaching changes are, look, we scream for them all the time in hockey. And hell, I'm an Oilers fan. Everyone's screaming about coaching changes all the time. That doesn't, I mean, that can solve problems, but something like this, it just seems a little bit outside of just being about team performance. And it could be something, as we just heard, that it could be something as straightforward as, hey, you know what, there's a better deal out there. Because we just don't know. We don't know what the salary bases are like, and we see that in the NBA. Happening in the NFL. It's like it's a reason why coaches will eventually go on. When you're like the offensive coordinator at the or as a defensive coordinator on the Patriots, you just go to another squad eventually, right? It happens. So yeah, I would actually say I don't think we should read too far into this until we see what the performance of the team is like, because it's entirely possible it could be worse. I saw a few funny comments where people are like, "Great, they have a Korean coach." I'm like, so what? Your coach has to work with your team, and the Valiant are not an all-Korean roster.
Right.
They're not coming from a system. I'd like to see how this goes. I mean, it's like, again, tooting the horn of Canadian players. It's like agilities. I don't know. How's he going to handle? I don't know. I doubt that we'll see a huge transition in necessarily like the on-field or the in-game play, but again, it has yet to be seen, and I just wouldn't worry too much about it. I mean, I hope for them, I really hope for them, they do not do worse, because it will be a very bad look for that organization, because then the questions will come up as to what has happened. If that happens, ooh, I would not want to be in that room.
Yeah, I mean, like Gil was saying, we've seen feast and famine from the Immortals squad and the Immortals organization and how they've done. So hopefully they're not going stage by stage, ups and downs. But Kyle, last words and thoughts here on Cuddles leaving the LA Valiant.
So RootBear said that he saw a comment that someone said, "Oh yeah, they have a Korean coach." They had a Korean coach. That was the coach over the Contender Season 1.
Yeah.
And so he was the coach that like brought this change in communication that caused Immortals to initially just completely like die. They had the terrible C9 on Gibraltar that like every time I watch back I'm just like, oh, that pain. But like stuff like that
in my mind,
yeah, they brought in Cuddles, and then like 3 weeks later they pushed out Ooks, who was their initial coach, and then Cuddles took over. That was to me it read as we don't like the direction of our coaching staff, we would like to go with another coaching staff's direction, we like what Cuddles is doing, so on and so forth. Now what it seems like is Cuddles got a very, very, very enticing offer, and like I'm trying to like wonder like where the pyramid of jobs in OWL is. Like players are pretty good, analysts are probably worse than players. Assistant coaches are probably okay in terms of like pay and compensation, all that stuff. Head coaches probably make a decent amount. I'm just gonna assume GMs probably make more. So I'm thinking he probably either got a better paying head coaching gig at another team who's just like really just throwing cash at the problem, or he got a GM gig either for an existing team or a new team. Maybe he's thinking about location, like where he wants to live in 2 years or whatever. He doesn't want to live in LA. That's fine. I don't blame you. If he wants to live in England, if there's a second, if there's like a second English team or like another European team or just somewhere else in the world that like is offering him a better deal, more money, a better place to live, whatever, why not take that? So that's what I would do in his position.
That's true. If I ever got a job as a popcorn vendor, I would certainly field better offers for maybe a hot dog vendor or a t-shirt cannon firer.
Cold beer here.
Yeah, get your beer here. Get your ice cold beer. Yeah, I definitely I have some skills. Anyone in the Overwatch League looking for a t-shirt cannon firer or better yet, a full-blown mascot. I'm I'm your guy. I can't wait for that to happen. The first team that hires a like full-time mascot, I'm putting all of my efforts to get that job. But let's move right along. And in the vein of organizational changes, Mayhem actually, throwing their hat in again. They did just hire an assistant coach in Ryder, I believe. I don't have these things off the top of my or written down because I'm an idiot, but I believe it was Ryder as an assistant coach. But now they're looking for an analyst on Twitter. They posted on Twitter. So, Death, is this maybe Mayhem turning it around? Can I start putting my neck out for him again?
Well, we can't stop you from putting your neck out for this particular team, no matter how poorly they do. You just are a glutton for punishment as far as the Florida Mayhem are concerned. It's just kind of just an about time scenario for me. Like, thankfully you're looking. I hope you've been looking this whole time. And listen, I think it's more of a PR move. Like, hey, just letting everybody know we are trying to completely flesh out the coaching staff. I don't know that they're seriously looking for analyst applications. I don't care because they're getting mine anyways. But at the end of the day, they have to be looking. They have to be expanding to their infrastructure, to their organization, to absolutely every aspect of this team. We've already seen them go after, adding players, which was great. And we've seen them add one coach, but it's still more than a two-man job. And I think you see that when you look at all the other teams and what they're doing. I don't know exactly how many coaches they all have, but I'm of the opinion here that like it's really hard to have so many that it's a problem, right? As long as they're all micromanaged by the head coach and the communication funnels through him, and he can handle it, then fine, bring in as many voices as you can, because it's just different opinions that and different stats and different clips that you're able to find and present to the coach and to the team. So great. By all means, this is a phenomenal thing. I'm not going to be picking them to be any higher than 11 in my power ranks yet, but you can put them 4 or wherever you want to put them, Blevins.
Hey. 2, man, 2. But RootBear, is this going to be enough? I mean, is Florida Mayhem going to be able to do enough with additional coaching staff to actually move up past the bottom rungs of the Overwatch League?
I think they are in the same position as a lot of squads right now. I saw that analyst role come up, and my hunch is this, and it's completely based off of my research in the other teams. I think a lot of the squads generally they've started off quite thin. If you take a look at what they've got, the focus of the entire league has been on getting good on-field product. Like, get the teams ready, get the tech working, make sure you've got, well, in some cases, not all, you've got some decent creative, right? Boston's, I don't think was that strong. I mean, it's nothing compared to New York's creative, but New York is also like the best when it comes to creative production right now. But the focus has been on the media and making sure the game works. SF Shock put up a post the other day looking for a social media coordinator. Now, this is the San Francisco Shock. This is the team that was purchased by, like, with all the really crappy, like, J-Lo callouts and Shaq and all that. Like, it was like I thought it was a really crappy launch video, because it was that really bad, like, celebrity baiting. We're like, hey, I'm reading generic statement number 7. I'm really excited about a thing I've never talked about before, but buy this thing. It's like a really bad testimonial. But all that said, I think the front offices in a lot of these squads are actually really thin. I don't think there's a ton of focus right now on audience development in a lot of squads. I know that I was meeting with some of the XL, staff, and I've gotten to know a little bit of the structure of the organization, and it's true. They've been working on getting the team working, because they had to get houses, they had to get visas, right? Poor Philadelphia, they ran into that situation where that the player visas got stuck at the wrong office, because you can either go to Nebraska or the other one, and Nebraska is where you don't want to go for work visas because you're stuck in a backlog. So I think what we're seeing now is the teams starting to balance that out. And it's going to happen in the context of actual, like, again, in-game analysis and direct team support. And we're also seeing it in just general front office support. And really, again, it's sort of like the coaching shifts. I think what we're seeing is more the product of where teams have started out, because they have been hyper-focused on making sure these players can live in a reasonable way. right? Making sure the assets there, making sure, look, you got folks that are traveling from other countries. It's their first time in a country. You know what's more important for a team coming in than having a new analyst on the squad when you can survive without one, because there's enough analysis being done on every game that, hell, if you don't have an analyst, just go to the internet. You're gonna find it. You go hit competitive Overwatch subreddit, you're going to find the analysis. I think we're naive if we think only those that are sitting on site as with the title analyst can actually analyze the game. Look at the podcast you guys have here. I would just listen to you guys and be like, that's all the things I'm doing wrong, which is lots of things, because I'm a really average to crappy player, right?
Same.
But like I tell people, don't let the Twitch thing, like on my Twitch banner, like ever fool you, because it says I had 43 caps, like as Zenyatta, but like that happened once, and it was on a console, and I was just tailing off of an amazing Roadhog. So really, it was just like I was just like blink, finish everyone off. But that said, I think what we're going to see over this stage, and actually the next stage, is the fleshing out of the front office. I think you're going to see similar ads continuing all the way through stage 2, and you're going to see them coming through stage 3. And my firm belief is that we're not going to see this actually level out for another year, because what the teams don't have right now is they don't have a lot of on-site experience. Like, they don't have boots on the ground trying to do things like venue identification. Houston, we just saw, Houston early days. Oh, we're going to have $70 million in a venue. Cool. Who's going to make that happen? Those people haven't been hired yet. I mean, this is just a reality of business, right?
You don't know.
No, exactly.
And
the funny, it's a promise. Right now. And that's the thing. What we're really seeing is, and I think it's fascinating. We're seeing entire business lines being built. So I think, one, it's good for Florida. I think they can use that. I think they needed a couple extra players. They've done that. But what it's coming down to is, now that the teams are playing, the players are in the country, or they're able to, have a house. The setups are working, and then again, you've got to take care of them for those who are streamers. You got to make all that stuff work. Now that it's there, now you can fix the housekeeping. Because I've told a lot of folks, some people were a little bit upset about like New York not having a viewing party, and I'm like, yeah, we didn't have one, so we just threw our own. But more importantly, it's this. In general, I mean, assuming the team's doing okay, right? Would you rather watch a team or see a team that has reasonable in-game performance and didn't throw a party, or would you have a cracking party once or maybe twice and just watch a total, like, completely terrible team?
Right. I mean, for sure. I mean, you definitely want the team more so, though. I really would probably trade it all for one great party, but that's another. That's another.
Dallas. I mean, look at Dallas. These
true.
guys have their official parties, and you're and the thing is, I like Dallas. I want them to do well. I want XQC to do well. Again, that's my Canadian bias. Like, I watch that kid all the time, and I'm like, you can do so much more.
Yeah.
You have this great opportunity, and it's difficult because you're being put in a situation that no one has trained you for, and that's where you're going to see more staff pickups. Look, speaking as somebody who's come to this country on working visa, right, and please, I hope I can stay beyond next year, as I try to work at some of those details. But I can tell you, there are little things people don't tell you about. So my heart goes out for someone like XQC, because I know what that stress can be like. Things they don't tell you when you come into a new country. Your credit rating from Canada means nothing. You thought you had a credit card? Not anymore. It doesn't transfer.
Where are we going?
Right? No one tells you this, right? Yeah, and it's just one of those crazy things, right? You just kind of go along with it, and the teams they've got to build up on that, right? And it's this huge challenge that I think is facing these organizations, that most organizations I've worked for and that I've worked with as a client don't fully appreciate that until shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to curse. I should have asked.
Now you've got to do that thing at the beginning of the episode.
Oh,
that's true. I didn't do the proper briefing. I did not think that the Florida Mayhem analyst question was going to get into the politics of XQC, but we got there, boys.
No, but that's what I think is going to happen, though. It's a big thing, and I think each team is different, and they're figuring out their holes. And like I said, the analyst position, I think it was relatively low on the rung, honestly, of priorities for a lot of teams. Like, in context, and Florida, Florida only also picked up a roster of 6. I think they were trying to figure out what they could do, and a lot of these squads are trying to do that as well too. It's see what you can stretch, and because what's really important is don't overextend right now. And if you hire a team of huge analyst team, huge this, look, it's a massive free agent dispersal. If you did the thing where you brought in like a staff of like 500, like your like Mariah Carey, attendance, like it could go really bad really fast because you have too many cooks, right?
Yeah.
And they're building too much by committee. And I think Florida's doing the thing where they're starting hyper lean, which is very startup, right? And they're building up slowly. And my hunch is they'll stabilize. I think most of these teams will. Like same with Shanghai, they're going to stabilize. They just need time. And like we've seen what, a month of games.
It's definitely too early to tell for Florida.
Absolutely.
But Kyle here, what are there any other thoughts here for Florida moving forward with the analyst position?
So I'm going to try to be relatively brief here. I think that they definitely needed to fill slots. They finally, this stage, they decided that maybe 6 players and 1 coach is not an adequate supporting system for teams that have 12 players and like 4 coaches, an analyst, and a GM. So they're kind of making progress in that direction, which is good. It might be too little too late, though. But the one thing I did find weird is that with Saya Player, with Awesome Guy, and with Ryder, they knew those players ahead of time. They didn't post on Twitter saying, hey, we're looking for some like pretty good DPS players. Anyone know anyone who's like good at shooting stuff and like a tank who's good at getting hit a lot and not dying? Just let us know. That's what they're doing with this, though, which I find kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you not know good analysts? Are you like that strapped for information that you're like,
if they don't know, then yeah, definitely hire me. I'm perfectly qualified for it.
Like, you might as well at that point throw it out to the competitive Overwatch subreddit because, like GreatRootBear said, like there are some phenomenal analysts up there, tons of quality talent with a really deep knowledge of the I'm being sarcastic like that.
What do you mean Reddit's not perfect?
But like I find it odd how they're like they don't know a good analyst. Like, I mean, maybe they're trying to hope that there's some diamond in the rough, but like it's just odd that they don't know of one, considering that there's tons and tons of people in all the tier 2 scenes who are like doing great work and going completely unnoticed.
I mean, of course they know them. It's just a PR stunt to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Or of course they know them, and the people who know that, or the people that they know, just don't want to work for Florida. That's also possible. Yeah. But Gil, last thoughts here on Florida Mayhem and the picking up of this analyst.
Well, I mean, I think they have identified some of the core problems, and they've already addressed a few. We talked earlier about Zappis and Saya Play, an awesome guy coming in. They knew they needed more people on the roster. Give them that strategic depth from that perspective. They knew they needed some supportive depth. And I just want to talk about like the difference between coaches and analysts, because I think that a lot of people think that the coaching staff is there to help them with strategy and that kind of analytics. And that's generally not what coaching staff is for. I don't know how they're operating in their organization. But they knew that that they needed some support staff in there to help them with their practice regimen. How are they approaching game day? Even things like what's their diet like, and taking care of the players as human beings. And then now they also notice that they need some more of that strategic depth behind the scenes. So they're getting an analyst. And I think that it's great that we just brought Reddit into this. That was just golden. Like the analysis that you can get online. Like I just want to say, so I have been on an analyst desk before, and people would message me and say things like, like, hey, you're saying things and people are believing you, and I'm like, that's their problem. If I say something stupid up there, okay, like there are people way more qualified than I am to actually get in depth with the game. Like at the core, I'm actually more of an entertainer, and I do analyze the game, and I think I do a decent enough job at it. I would never apply to one of these jobs, but there are a lot of people out there that want to work in video gaming. This is just the honest truth. And the easiest point of entry for that, I think, for a lot of players, that is not pro players, but people who play the game, is, well, I understand the game very well, so I'm going to be an analyst. And you have a lot of people that are putting in a lot of legwork to try to communicate with teams and network, and so they 100% they have a group of analysts that they have decided not to go with, and it could be because the actual quality of that analysis was not up to their standards. And so they're reaching outside of that pool of people that are already in their network, because it's a little dry. It's a lot drier than I think a lot of people think, because when you're talking about analysis on a level of depth that is required for actual teams to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot deeper than you might think, and it's going to involve a lot more work and a lot more of an analytical perspective than a lot of people think. And so I think that they don't want to settle with anyone that's been bouncing around the scene maybe and just hasn't impressed anyone. It is hard to say though. It is a little weird, and I think that it definitely has to be at least partially PR related. They want to make sure they know that their fan base is aware that they are trying to address these issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that doesn't take a lot of skill and is not very deep is selling hot dogs. So get your hot dogs. Okay, I'm done. Let's move on. We've got another slobber knocker build for this week, another rivalry brewing and another rematch here. We've got London versus New York, round 3, which is interesting because they played 2 times last in the regular season of the stage and the playoffs, and now they're playing in the first week of stage 2. So I mean, Root, I know who you're going to be rooting for, but who do you think is going to win here, and what's kind of your analysis of it?
This one's going to be a tricky one. I actually don't know. I really don't know. I think New York can handle this match if they look. I think SabeLB said it really well. Right? They got a little bit cocky. They took a couple risks. Probably shouldn't have done that. And there were numerous times where they just didn't, seal that deal. Every time I see .2 on Dorado for XL, I'm always like, oh man, bad things happen there. And also every time, and every time they hit Horizon, I'm like, oh god, not this map. A lot of folks like to pick on Janus, and I think it's misplaced. I think the strategy didn't work. But in this case, I think it will be. Here's the thing. There is a whole lot of tape from those matches, all of them, right? All from the same day, and they're all recent. This isn't like early stage, right? A month ago type play. They have very up-to-date information. I think what this is going to come down to for either squad is using that information, figuring out how to exploit it against the other squad. Because I can tell you, if I don't think we're going to see Janus running Winston and Libero running a Genji again on Horizon. It wasn't working, and it went on for too long. But the thing is, you can't. It's tough to do a running line change in Overwatch, like a quick strat. It's very difficult because the players are structured. You're set on a strategy, and you got to hold it. It's like boxing. The boxers don't figure anything out on the fly. I mean, they look for openings, but you do what your corner tells you to do. They're like, so-and-so is dropping his arms, hit him with a lot of left. That's what you do, right? You do that as best as you can because you rely on the staff to manage this. So I think whomever wins this particular battle is going to be the team that has the more astute coaches, and who has come up with more potential modifications so that when the teams go up, they can make those quick on-the-fly changes. So it's going to come down to coaching, and it's going to come down to who can adapt faster. And I think we'll have to see. This one, I don't know. I'm not going to hold proud on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I am, but that's just because I value my fandom more than my pick'em points every week, as evidenced by me picking Mayhem more than 0 times. But Kyle, what are your thoughts here? Who are you picking? Why? What do you think this one's going to come down to?
I'm thinking NY because I think that as good as London is a really good team at kind of not that many things. They're really good at dive. That was like they were tutored for the entirety of stage 1. Like, oh, this is a really good dive team. They're really good at dive. They can run dive well. And that was all I really heard. Then they eventually at stage, week 5, they're like, Junkrat. We'll pick up Junkrat a little bit here and there and completely destroy Houston. Sadly. But I think New York is a much more. They have deeper hero pools individually, and thus they have, despite the fact that they have, kind of a smaller roster, they can still make that work to their advantage. You can run so many more comps, I think, with New York than you can with London, without London having to switch in and out players, which, as we've seen, kind of is not that good for them to do. So I think that New York's hero flexibility between anyone who can run a Roadhog. They ran like 4 or 5 different players on their one team on Roadhog. So they have a couple pretty good Roadhogs if it comes down to tanks. They have great Zaryas. They have good, if it runs dive. If dive is a thing that everyone needs to run, they can do that well. If tanks is a thing they need to run, they can also do that well. Whereas I feel like London can only run dive well as of right now, and they're going to have to take a lot of changing to be able to run tanks as well as I think New York can.
Definitely a lot of good points there. But Gil, what are your thoughts here? Who do you got?
Yeah, this one is a tough one for sure. But and when I look at this, one of the filters that I want to use is looking at the new patch and how is it going to affect these teams, because they're very close to each other. And I'd like to say that since the Spitfire have 4 supports, that the Mercy changes are going to benefit them. But really, it's just I don't think that's going to be how it plays out. I don't think that's really relevant. In which case, I would have to say that NYXL, I think they're going to be the ones that take it. I think it's going to be close. I think they're going to adapt to the new meta just as well, if not better, than the London Spitfire. And one of the most pivotal parts of that is going to be that tanky front line. I think that tanks, in order of importance, I think tanks are going to be the most important for dominating fights and choosing where you're fighting and dictating the flow of battle. And then the supports are coming in right after that at a close second for importance. And the tanky front line from New York Excelsior is going to bring them forward in this initial match at the very least. And they're going to be able to give a few more looks, take it to the London Spitfire.
Definitely hard to bet against a tank line that includes Meko. But Death, last thoughts here on NY versus London round 3.
Yeah, so listen, I think London is a really, really strong reactive team. I think they adapt to what's going on in the meta well, and they get better as the stage goes on. And I think New York is, for the most part, a pretty airtight team right now. And when I look at what went wrong for them, for New York, in the loss to London in the playoffs, you can look at the kill feed at the end of that Dorado map. It's arc dies, arc dies, arc dies, arc dies. It just kept happening over and over again. Was it Arc's fault? I don't know. But for whatever reason, London was able to get to him when he was on the Mercy. Now we're going to put some rollerblades on the guy, set him free, let him listen to some music. It's going to be a lot better for him. He's going to be able to peel and be a little bit more mobile. So I think he's going to do well and feel more comfortable on that Lucio role, even if he was one of the better, adaptive plug and play Mercy players that the league saw. I just don't see weaknesses when I look at New York's team. And I've talked about really the only issue I have with them is, can they close it out? Can they finish it? Are they going to choke? Are they going to be that team? Well, nobody chokes in week 1. You don't do that. So give me NY. I think it's going to be, in the neighborhood of 3-1. The maps will be competitive. But I think New York's going to win this one fairly solidly.
Yeah, when we looked at the pick'em numbers and just in talking to people, it seems like so many people have NY, which I'm always happy with. I always want to see people picking NY, but it seems like, man, I'm just a little concerned. Not concerned, but like I don't know. I don't want to jinx it, so I'll just shut my trap here and just root for NY blindly. But that does bring us to the end of round 2. We got a close one to go. I literally do say that after every round, don't I? But we've got a close one. I sure do, and I'm going to keep doing it. We got a close one going into the final round. We've got Kyle at 53 points. We've got GreatRootBear at 54. We've got Deathblow at 56, and Gil Frost just barely trickling ahead at 57 points. So this buy or sell round is definitely going to be a big one.
The payload is approaching its destination.
So that does bring us to our last full round of play. This, of course, is the buy or sell round, where you are going to have to say buy or sell, whether you agree or disagree with this topic. And we are running quite low on time, so we're going to try to keep these ones quick. But we will start with you, Kyle. We've got, like we've already talked about before, we've got the week 1 of the stage having a lot of rematches from week 5 of the previous stage. So we're kind of seeing the same exact matches play out. So buy or sell these almost just duplicate matches going 1 week right after the other.
Buy, 1,000 years buy, because week 5 was like one of the best weeks in terms of just even close matchups that I think we've seen in the entire first stage. The Boston-Houston one was really, really close. The New York-London one was really, really, really close. And we saw Houston-London as well. There's just like lots of really good close matches, and it'll be nice to see where these teams ended up adapting to the new meta. So I think it'll be a good time to like revisit these matchups.
definitely. Gil Frost, your thoughts?
I'm also buying, and I think that for me it's like an experiment. Teams are making a lot of changes. Of course, it's a new patch, and we're going to be able to compare and contrast these matches from the last week of the last stage, and now the first week with these new changes. We're going to be able to kind of see how they've impacted these teams.
Definitely agree with you there. Deathblow, buy or sell?
Well, it seems like it's a seller's market, so I'm going to sell this idea here. The reason is because I want to see how these teams grow and improve over time. Now it's going to be forever before I get to see, Houston go up against London again. And it's part of this is because it just happened to work out that like the playoffs were already the rematch, right? So now it's like the third time in a row, and so it's not going to be as big of a problem going forward. Just a little bit of bad luck there, but I don't know. It's just going to take so long to see these teams go up against each other. Once they play this time, I'd almost like to have seen it spaced out a little bit. If the playoffs weren't, rematches of the final week right away and the same day, then yeah, I would have been a lot more for this. But I'll sell it given the schedule from the end of stage one.
And RootBear, last words here: buy or sell the rematches week over week?
Completely buy, 100%. It gave us it gave us a whole round of content to talk about, and that's what it's about, right? It's rivalries are going to be met, and there's going to always be pressure at the end of any stage, just given how the league has been structured. And this is playing into the fact that people want to come back from whatever they saw. So I think it's smart. Keeps us, plus it locks us in right away at the stage, so we don't forget that the league is around. Because we're right around the corner from March Madness, and that's going to be a huge chunk that's going to fight against the league.
That is definitely true, but we will move right along. Man, we tried to talk about this, and I tried to have Deathblow explain to me exactly how this playoffs, the season playoffs work. I've finally gotten how the stage playoffs work. It's actually pretty easy, and I'm imagining that the stage playoffs will be, or the season playoffs will be the same. But we basically had that season playoffs format announced, and the easiest way for me to describe it to you is that it's a best of fives across 3 days. A set number of matches are going to be played on day 1 and day 2, and then depending on how many more matches a team needs to win the best of 5, there will be more matches on day 3. I think that's the best way to explain it. I'm sure Blizzard will come out with a video. So after that mouthful of explaining, Gil Frost, are you buying or selling this season playoff format?
This one was tough because it's like almost too complicated to, like a part of me just wants it to be simple, but I'm definitely buying. And the reason being is we've seen, even in the last week of play, we saw so many close matches, and these teams are much closer than I think a lot of us predicted coming into the first season. And now what we're going to be able to see is actually that taken to the next level. So now we don't have to wait another several weeks before you get to see two teams play once again. We're going to see these teams adjusting from day to day and how they're approaching each match. And I think we're going to get some close series of matches. It's complicated.
See, now you're using
terminology.
Terminology.
Just how close a lot of these teams are.
Yeah, there's a lot of jargon and specific terminology, so you got to be careful what words you use to describe things. But Deathblow, buying or selling this new playoffs format?
Oh, this is a hard buy. This is a phenomenal format. The more Overwatch you get to play within the playoff matches, the better, because that leads to the best team more likely coming out of the match as the victor. I think it's something you see in just about every sport that's not football, because in football you have the serious risk of physical injury every time the ball gets snapped. Like, it's just not feasible to play a best of 7 in football. It's absolutely feasible to do in Overwatch. The only negative part is that there might be 3 best of 5s being played out on one day, on the final day. It's the only part about it that even makes me remotely iffy, and that's only because it might happen to both matchups in the playoff week at any given time. So it's a little bit rough, but this is awesome. This is going to give us the best possible teams coming out of the playoffs. On the overall, this is phenomenal. Maybe some slight tweaks.
Yeah, definitely agree with a lot of what you're saying there. RootBear, what are your thoughts here, buying or selling this playoff format?
I got to agree. Hard buy. Series are right. That's where it's at. Again, I'm a big hockey fan just because I'm from Canada. The playoffs test the teams, but what's critical is that you need, by virtue of the way Overwatch, the league is structured, you need to have these to be series. Look, I think in the end it'll work out well. But what's great is the This is going to test the teams not on their one-shot talent. It's going to test them on their depth, perseverance, mental fortitude. I mean, we're going to see crazy things happen. Look, you're going to see some pretty big collapses. I guarantee you. You can mark my words. If I'm wrong, I will buy you a root beer. But I think we are going to see
great root beer.
A great root beer.
It will be an A&W brand root beer, and it will come from Canada, and it's going to be in one of them frosty mugs.
Ooh.
Oh, so not a great root beer.
That's a great.
Are you kidding me? That sounds pretty great.
I will have you know, Canadian root beer is very different from American root beer. Y'all are a little bit lighter on the whole sarsaparilla thing here, but it does taste different. But it has to be from A&W. Exactly.
Did a Canadian just yawl me?
Yeah,
we are getting all sorts of things. I am definitely awarding points for the sarsaparilla infusion in the root beer. But moving on, Kyle, last words here. Are you buying or selling the playoff format?
Buying, but not like with a lot of money. I'll put like a $5 on it at the most. I think that it's really cool. I always want to see more Overwatch. More Overwatch is more better. We want to see lots of
points for grammar for sure.
we want to see how good these teams are, and you can't necessarily see that based on one particular matchup. There's always particular random things that happen. Whereas if you are playing a best of 5 of best of 5s, like 25 possible maps total, you get a really good understanding, so you can make sure that the best team, absolutely, without a doubt, of this whole season is the one winning. I do think that it is absolutely terrible that you have possibility for there being 15 maps played in a day. That's a lot. London mentioned that this was like really, really rough to do, but you know, why are we still doing this? I guess if it's not guaranteed that's going to happen, it's better, but it'd be nice to see if we could have it like a possibility that there'd be more days, but it's kind of hard to see. So I can understand why there's that problem in the first place.
Yeah, man, there could be a really, really long day of Overwatch, which is going to be great for us as fans, maybe not so much for the people playing it, but we will move.
Not for those playing Overwatch League-related drinking games.
Or Overwatch League-related Sour Patch eating games, which Death and I were doing, and it literally destroyed the lining of my stomach and throat.
He ate one bag of them.
Okay, I haven't eaten Sour Patch Kids in years. I haven't had that much.
It was like
sour
a legit
stuff.
One serving, the recommended daily serving.
It was more than one serving. One bag is not one serving.
You couldn't handle it.
I couldn't handle the Sour Patch Kids, man. And I haven't eaten that much sugar in years.
Sounds disgusting.
I had a worse hangover than if I had been drinking alcohol, but that is for another show. We had the announcement, Fact Fiction. We talked a little bit about it before moving to Outlaws, but Death, I want buying or selling Fact Fiction actually making an improvement. It's thought he's probably a bench player here, and maybe not at least not a definite starter. So buying or selling an improvement to the Outlaws with the addition of Fact Fiction.
Is it an improvement? Yes. Is it much of an improvement? No, because like you said, I don't think he gets into the lineup very much. I think this team was built around Cool Matt and Muma. I don't expect them to go anywhere. Fact Fiction will help in the film room. He's going to be a great player coach. He's going to be a great bench player in the event that, you know, there's some illness. If they're going into a big, heavy triple tank composition, you can bring him in if you want to play like the Winston and the Reinhardt. But no, I think the starters on this team are probably going to remain the starters. The biggest aspect of this, assuming nobody gets sick or nothing crazy happens, and I'm not just outright wrong, is that like Florida didn't get him, or other teams that they might have to play against didn't get this guy, because he is good enough to start in this league. I just think he's on par with Muma on some heroes, and then on others not so much. So why take Muma out?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said here, but I don't think you said buy or sell, so we're gonna have to take away a couple of points here.
Trying to get our guest that ran away.
I know. I think Root Beer had to walk away. He drank too much sarsaparilla, so we're gonna skip over him for now. So Kyle, buying or selling Fact Fiction, improving the Outlaws?
Buying again with maybe $10 this time. I think that it helps in that, like Death mentioned, you have a player coach, you have someone to sit down with Moom. I mean, you also have Mezzer too, who's also a phenomenal tank player. So you have now a second or a third voice who's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't have, earth shattered here. But what you do have is also, like Death mentioned, you're still on my great points. you have him not on another team, you can make sure that like Muma doesn't have to face off against him, which would be rough. But you also do have another player that if you want to run in-house scrims, it's a little bit easier to do because you have lots of other coaches within who could be running. Like they mentioned at the start of the team that you could run Tyrong as that Lucio, and they're going to have Mezra as the tank, but now you just need to have Tyrong as a Lucio, and then you can run in-house scrims pretty easily, which is cool. But yeah. Bye.
Yeah, definitely some good points here. Oh, we've got Root Beer back. Root Beer, Root Beer Bear, blah, blah, blah. I can't talk. But we'll jump over to you first, Root Beer. Buying or selling Fact Fiction improving the Houston Outlaws?
Buying. I think Fact Fiction is a great player, and but generally speaking, it never hurts to add a little bit of depth. I think it's going to be just good for player management. I think burnout is going to become pretty serious. And stress in general. So I can't imagine much better of a pick to have just as a backup to have floating around. This is a pretty solid player. So yeah, it makes Houston that much scarier.
For sure. And Gil, last words here on Fact Fiction: buy or sell?
I am buying, and I'm going to go out on even further than that. I'm going to say if they had a Reinhardt player like Factor Fiction, and not to take away from Muma skill, but a different look strategically in your tank line, I think they might have gone all the way in the playoffs for stage 1. I think that might have been the X factor. I can't imagine that they would pick up someone that has the LAN experience, team experience, the integration with Raucous. I mean, they're already going to be hitting the ground running. That Fact Fiction has. If they just wanted to take it away from another team, or if they weren't going to actively work him into their strategies. And we did see that their tanks were getting focused, and their strategy kind of ran out there at the end of stage 1. Now they're going to have that much more to bring to stage 2.
Definitely a lot of good points and a lot of people in favor of Fact Fiction here. We are moving on to our last buy or sell question, which I'm starting to delineate as the almost meme question, or although for what it's worth, this may have been the most serious event that's happened in Overwatch history. But of course, I'm talking about the Puppy Rumble. We saw the Overwatch Puppy Rumble happen last night. It was an event for raising awareness for adopting dogs in different areas across the U.S. It was an event that really, like, from the onset, like, it was done flawlessly and amazingly from a production standpoint, but it could have gone so bad. It could have been so awkward, but it wasn't. So I gotta know, Root Bear, we'll start with you. Are you buying or selling the Puppy Rumble?
Totally buying it. Yeah, honestly, one of the funny things I always joke about the Overwatch community is people take themselves way too like, I'm the first person to say forget about SR. It's actually a fundamental odd calculation, so why do we rest so much weight on that? But look, in the end, the organization has to do things that are more than the game. Every league does it, every sport does it, every team does it. And if the charity of choice will be raising awareness around puppies that need adoption, because cats would be the same thing, but I don't think cats would do a very good job. They would just sit around and do nothing. But it wouldn't be a rumble, it'd be more like watch the Overwatch cat sit. But yeah, no, I think it's awesome. It's also like a nice point of lightness to have before things get really serious.
For sure. Kyle, buying or selling the Puppy Rumble?
I'm gonna buy, but this time I'm gonna put more money than $5 or $15. I'm gonna put whatever the price of those dogs were, because I had to convince my wife to not adopt a third dog because there's no room in this house. So I think it was great because if nothing else, there's 35,000 people watching, like 10 times more than the pit got. So it's like, first off, you're getting people following the Overwatch channel. So when an Overwatch League game or a test pit game comes up, they're like, oh, okay, well, there's this other thing. Like, those casters were pretty good. Let's watch this as well. Not to mention that, like, I think in terms of like practice for Uber and Seltzer and Monty and Doa, like they're like, coming in tomorrow and this week, they're going to come in like well practiced because they just had to cast dogs playing around each other for an hour and make it like sound professional. So A+ to them for that. I'm buying this. This is great.
I think you meant Dogga and Puppy Christo, but I won't take points away from you for that. Gil, buying or selling the Puppy Rumble here?
Can I break the rules? I mean, because I want to buy, but really I want to adopt. I think I want to adopt this one because I wanted to adopt Lulu, but I couldn't for multiple reasons. But yeah, it's kind of my melting point, our puppies. So it was also incredible to see like Monty and Doa casting the impossible. They made it sound really easy, and it was a really cool event. And yeah, Blizzard, they're a company that definitely wants to have a positive impact, and this is one way that I think the first of many ways that we're going to see that happen in the Overwatch community. And so I think it was definitely a buy/adopt situation.
For sure. Cannot take points away for adopting there. If anything, you got more points. But Deathblow, last words, buying or selling the Puppy Rumble?
I'm definitely buying, and I would have probably had to fist fight anybody that tried to sell this because it was a phenomenal event. The community outreach alone is just great. It's something that I think sets an example for the teams in particular, stuff they can do in their cities. It's just an example for them that I hope they all follow and use it as a great way to reach their fans in their home cities and to create some brand evangelists. But one thing I will say is there's only one aspect of it I wanted to sell, and that was Tabitha, because she was a bully and she wouldn't leave Lulu alone. And Lulu was overpowered, so they need to consider some significant balance changes here.
Yeah.
Because on Symmetra, Lulu was able to just take constantly two-on-ones, three-on-ones against bigger dogs. It didn't matter. Lulu was a champion, the true MVP, and I was really, really mad that I couldn't adopt Lulu because I might have.
I wanted August so bad. Definitely the most underrated puppy in the Puppy Rumble for sure. I think bang for your buck, August was a great. I mean, obviously everyone wants to first pick Lulu. Like it's like you're not getting Jonak in your draft. Right. It's like you got to go for your August. August was adorable. But for sure, I mean, I was going to say anyone who sold the Puppy Rumble was immediately getting ejected and lost all their points. So you all passed that one with flying colors. Well, that does bring us to the end of our regular play. We, of course, are going to break it down into the finalists for one last showdown. But let's go over the scores. This was, I think, I do say this at the end of every one, but I think this actually is the closest one. We had a tie for third place with Kyle and GreatRootBear at 70 points apiece. So congrats to both of you for putting up such a great score. But we are moving on to our final question between Deathblow and Gil Frost, the showdown of the century. So of course, for this final question, there's not points given out. I'm gonna give a question where both finalists get to make a case for their answer, and then I solely get to pick the winner and decide the winner of week 9 of ATP. So let's jump into it. So I want to know, between the two of you, which team do you think stands to benefit the most from the meta shift going into stage 2? And a coin flip has determined that Deathblow, you are going first here.
Sure, give me the Soul Dynasty. I think they have a lot of problems with their support synergy right now, and with being able to move Toby over to Lucio, where he is phenomenal, instead of being on Mercy, where he's okay, I think is going to make a huge difference for this team. It's not going to fix all their problems, and it's a little bit cherry picking because they're a team that should be up there and fell down kind of at the end of the stage. But nonetheless, I think they're going to be in a big way much better once they can get, and even if, oh man, imagine if Anna comes back into the meta a little bit. Shakeups in the support, I think, only benefit the Dynasty because in a non-Mercy meta, I do think they have probably the best 2 support players in the entire league.
For sure. Gil Frost, your pick.
We'll talk about teams that have fallen from grace, or at least fallen from what our expectations of them were. It's got to be Dallas Fuel. Dallas Fuel is going to benefit the most from the changes going into the second part of the first season here. And I think that it's for some of the similar reasons. Chips, he was forced onto, some support picks that he didn't want to. And I don't think they liked the Mercy overall. And so I think they're going to be able to feel much more comfortable with the new meta, not needing to play quite as much Mercy. And they're a team that has already proven that they can be on that top tier. And so they're going to be coming out firing here in stage 2.
I agree. Rascal's going to make a big difference.
Oh
And
man.
AKM?
Yeah, man, this is a close one. I like the concept of the finalist thing, but I really do hate having to pick here.
Actually picking,
And
yeah.
NYXL.
Not wearing a tie never worked for Apple.
There's so much to pick from here, but I really do believe that Soul is the answer here. Being able to actually flex Jae Hong onto a hero that he really was built for, essentially best Ana in the world, and being able to actually flex those muscles is going to be a benefit here. So Deathblow, you finally won. You got there. The floor is yours for your victory lap speech, whatever you want to do. It is yours after this 2 seconds of you knowing that you captured the objective. All right, the floor is yours.
Okay, I waited 2 seconds. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. But I just want to use this time and stop and thank you, Blevins, and really everybody that works and does just phenomenal work with High Noon Productions. You guys produce absolutely all of my favorite Overwatch content. I can get everything I need from you guys in particular. The work that you do for us fans is extraordinary, and no amount of recognition would be adequate as a form of thanks from us fans on the sidelines. You've inspired me personally to pursue my own podcasting career, and I can't thank you enough for that. So thank you. Big thanks to everybody at High Noon Podcast specifically.
Yeah. For all of the new viewers, he is part of High Noon Podcast and High Noon Productions, so it's a complete and utter sellout. Yeah. Complete and utter sellout. And I mean, in a way, since I give out all the points, I guess it is kind of rigged. But but not
Every
really.
episode's been rigged.
Every single episode has been rigged. I keep bringing Gil Frost back in to like perpetually get second place. It's just he's the but no, honestly, everyone, thank you so much for being on. That is going to be our show. I hope you guys had some fun being on the show. I hope you guys, new listeners, had fun listening as well. But guys, that is going to conclude the show. Thank you for listening to Around the Payload. You can check out all of the stuff that all of the people that Deathblow thanked High Noon Productions do over at highnoonpodcast.com. Make sure to follow everyone that was on the show as well. I will put links to their Twitters and all of their stuff down in the description. And guys, if you're ever in New York City for an XL game, I got to just throw the plug out there. RootBear, where can people go to watch some awesome Overwatch League games for in New York?
You can always find the 5 Deadly Venoms crew over at the Waypoint Cafe down on Ludlow in the Lower East Side. We are there for every single game, and in fact, you will find me there for every single NYXL game. So anytime you want to come out, just find us on Twitter at NYXL_Venoms, and you will find an Eventbrite set up there where you can just sign up, come out. There is no charge. It's all ages, and you're just surrounded by generally awesome people.
Nice. I'm just a hair too many hours away from New York City to make it out there more often, but I promise I'm going to make it out there one of these days. But that is going to conclude the show, guys. Remember, you can find everything that we do over at highnoonpodcast.com. But for Gil Frost, for Deathblow, for Kyle, for RootBear, I am the Blevins. And remember, you can find us next week around the payload. Bye-bye. Around the Payload is a High Noon production. Check out all the High Noon productions at highnoonpodcast.com.